Well, good evening and welcome to Tucker Carlson tonight. Despite a total lack of evidence, lawmakers and the press continue to suggest that Donald Trump's presidential campaign was somehow co-opted by the government of Vladimir Putin. In lieu of actual proof, those pushing this theory have relied on innuendos, spinning every random meeting between a Russian and a Trump associate as evidence of a grand conspiracy. Well, that approach took a hit of some sort on Sunday when a spokesman for Vladimir Putin's government claimed that Hillary Clinton's presidential campaign also met with the Russian government multiple times.
Well, if you look at some people connected with Hillary Clinton during her campaign, you would probably see that he had lots of meetings of that kind. But there were no meetings about electoral process. There was in no way it should be perceived as interference in electoral process. There are lots of specialists in politology, people working in think tanks, advising Hillary or advising people working for Hillary.
Well, former Clinton campaign spokesman Nick Merrill has denied this, sort of, saying, quote, "It's not true, which is why they're using the word probably, is my guess." Still looks like another media narrative could be in big trouble. What is going on here exactly? Joining us tonight to explain it is the great Bob Beckel, co-host of The Five. Hey, Bob.
Hey, Chuck. How are you, buddy?
I'm doing great, but
Good.
confused. So night after night we talk about Russia. It seems to, if you were to ask me, put together a dossier on what's gone wrong in the Trump administration, it would be possible to do that. Russia would not be on the list.
No,
what is this about, really?
Well,
this
first of
Russia
all, we got to keep in mind here that having been involved in 3 presidential campaigns and running one of them, you're going to get people who are going to come representing campaigns or presumably representing campaigns.
Right.
And they come in and say, well, I'm with so-and-so, and I want to talk to you about your foreign policy guy or whatever. It's not unusual, first of all. And secondly, unless they're doing business on behalf of the United States government, which they're not doing, in Trump's case, I think, though, that there is some issue of intercepts that may actually prove to be evidence. But in Clinton's case, first of all, who cares now, right? But secondly, there's enough of the Russian connection with Trump that you can draw a pretty, easy, unevidenced narrative about it. So we'll have to wait and see. I mean, the intelligence community say that they have information that has Trump campaign people talking to the Russians. Now,
right.
Again, I still don't see that, but I don't, frankly, myself, don't find that a problem. But I suppose if you put it in the whole scheme of things, it sounds like a problem.
Well, I'm trying to understand this because, people all across Washington on the other cable channels going wall to wall with the Russia connection and the theory. So here's what we know. At the very beginning, from the U.S. intel community, their report says that the Russians tried to break into various email accounts, Republican and especially on the Democratic side, starting in March of 2015. That was before Trump announced. It was before anybody took him seriously. Is the claim that the Russians somehow knew that he was going to run, get the Republican nomination, and then be elected president?
I mean, it's the whole thing is just, first of all, it's amateur hour all the way around. And people who don't understand the game of presidential politics don't seem to understand that every presidential candidate has 1,000 representatives, whether they're on the payroll or not. And first of all, it would be, I think, frankly, a little bit of a problem if you didn't try to make some contact with major foreign powers around the world when you're running for president of the United States. I mean, that's not unusual. Everybody goes to Israel, for example, right?
Right.
So I don't, lacking evidence here. Now, I'm not easy on Trump. I'm pretty tough on him, but the one thing I know is not true is the Barack Obama taping his phones. But on the Russian thing,
that's a separate question.
Yeah, it's a separate question. But on the Russian thing, there's so many pieces of this Russian thing. You go back even before that, the issue about whether the Trump organization, the business organization, was involved with Russian banks and oligarchs in business. I don't know. And if they were, so what? I mean, that's their business.
Right. I mean, well, sure. And lots of people are involved in business with Russia or its satellite states, including Hillary campaign manager's brother, who's one of the biggest lobbyists in town. What does it add up to? But here's what my concern is. Obviously, the point of this is to delegitimize the election results and the Trump campaign. But more than that, Russia's a real country, and there are geopolitical consequences of this. You just had a Democratic Senator, Jeanne Shaheen of New Hampshire, describe what Russia did, and I'm quoting, as an act of war. Now, what does an act of war require? Well, an appropriate response, war. And so it seems like that's where we're moving, toward conflict with Russia. Why? To delegitimize Trump? It seems insane and reckless to me.
Yeah, well, it is. You know, whenever you get people in politics who don't understand foreign policy and don't understand geopolitics begin to talk about it in a political context, they're out of their league, and it leaves behind a trail of things. If you want to pick it up and you want to run with it, sure, you can run with it. But the problem here is there's only one issue, and on one issue only. I assume the intelligence committees are looking into this, and that is, was there anything from Russia having to do with suppression of votes or getting into campaign computers, that sort of thing? We knew all this, that the Russians have had conversations and dealt with WikiLeaks, but outside of that, I can't, as a Democrat and a liberal, I couldn't nowhere stand up here and say Trump and his organization were involved with Russia, because I just don't know, and I don't think anybody's talking about it knows.
Is this familiar, though, this pattern? I mean, you wrote an entire book about people's lives blowing up and then rebuilding their lives. It's a good book, by the way. But in that, you make the point that you have to come to terms with what went wrong before you can rebuild. And I wonder if all of this isn't, in addition to being a political exercise, kind of a psychological symptom of a party not willing to face what actually happened.
Well, you know, that's going in your mind, which is always wide and brilliant. You could probably reach out to that, but I don't give people enough. I mean, I don't think of anybody in my party who has that kind of depth, who could figure something like that out. I mean, Hillary Clinton clearly is somebody that has a lot of thinking to do about what happened. And if you look now, you look back on that campaign, I've been through all the polls now and looked at it, and clearly, for the first time, the Democrats forgot about rural America, and they were voting huge numbers. So, but we know that. So the question is, what's behind all this? And it seems to be a little bit of a reach to say that you're going to rebuild yourself by stepping on Trump and the Russians. There's probably a faster lane to get there.
Well, that does seem that way. I mean, I keep thinking, is there a single voter who voted for Trump or sat out this election who's watching this Russia story and thinking, oh, wow, Vladimir Putin hacked the election, whatever that means, I'm voting Democrat next time? Wouldn't it be more fruitful to think through, why didn't people who had voted Democrat for generations vote Democrat this election? That's
what, you know, there's always something about presidential campaigns, and I've been guilty of this in the past, and that is you want to justify what you've done if you lose. You know, like somehow it wasn't just us, it wasn't our strategy, it wasn't our candidate, but there were forces out there that we couldn't deal with. Now, you know, in some cases that's true. I mean, the economy and other things. But when you start putting together an international intrigue, you know, worthy of a bad foreign policy book, then I think you're reaching just too far. Because I don't think the average voter would make that connection anyway. I mean, did anybody say that they got a call from the Russians? I mean, you got to vote?
It doesn't make any sense. And for the new Cold War to be started by Democrats is so bewildering for those of us over 40. But do donors play a role in this? I mean, people spent hundreds of millions of dollars on this campaign, and they want to know what happened to their money. Is this an easy way to explain it to them?
Yeah, I think that something about that is quite true. I mean, I know I did that myself when I dealt with our donors, and you know, you always put the rosiest side on it you possibly can, but you know, so these guys are getting smarter and smarter now, and women, and they understand what goes wrong with the campaign. And this one, you know, the real problem for Clinton, if you think about it, is it was a well-run, on-target campaign up until election night.
Right.
And then all of a sudden, you begin to look and find the holes in it. And in Trump's case, it was a badly run, badly messaged campaign that happened to be the right message at the right time.
Exactly.
So I think all these exercises, every day you get away from the election, it becomes less and less important in the scheme of things. So I mean, Hillary Clinton, the real question for the Democrats is, who will you have on your bench to run the next time?
Exactly.
You know, and right now, I don't know who that is. For the Republicans, by the way, if Trump gets through 4 years, which I'm not sure he will, but if he does, he's going to have primaries against him, and that's not. You used to be. You and I both know you were in line to get this. The next person in line to get the presidency.
Yeah, no,
and no more.
No more. The market is open always.
Yes, sir. And I think draft you right now, buddy.
Happy where I am. Good to see you tonight, though. Thank you for that.
You too, Tuck.
So what makes a nation? Is it simply anyone who lives within the borders of a country, or is there something more to it? Well, they're debating that question right now in the Netherlands, which is holding an election on Wednesday. One of the top polling parties is the Party for Freedom. It's led by Geert Wilders, who has called for halting Muslim immigration into that country and pulling the Netherlands out of the European Union. Congressman Steve King of Iowa recently started a debate here in this country when he tweeted in support of Wilders. He wrote this: Wilders understands that culture and demographics are our destiny. We can't restore our civilization with someone else's babies. Well, King's comment was denounced as bigoted by many, including the Speaker of the House, but he has not apologized. Congressman King joins us tonight to explain. Congressman, thanks for coming on.
Oh, thanks for having me on, Tucker. I appreciate it.
So you've seen the reviews, obviously, of your tweet, and the left was merciless. I mean, some of them were unbelievable. John Lewis called you bigoted and racist. Anna Navarro at CNN said you're an embarrassment to the human race. The Speaker of the House, your Speaker, said he'd like to believe that you misspoke. Did you misspeak, and what did you mean when you wrote that?
No, Tucker, I didn't misspeak at all. I said exactly what I meant. And this is a message over to Europe, over to the Netherlands, a message to Geert Wilders, who does understand this. But the birth rates in especially Western Europe, but also Eastern Europe and in the United States, all of Western civilization have gone down below the replacement rate, with the exception of Israel, as the only Western civilization, first world country that has a birth rate that's above their death rate. And so we have to do something to increase our birth rate, or the vacuum that's created will be filled by people that don't believe in our values here in Western civilization. And we're seeing it happen in the Netherlands and all across Europe. And that's a lot about what the race is about that's coming up here in a couple of days in the Netherlands.
So the solution to that in the United States has simply been to import people from other countries, and that increases the population, despite the fact that the birth rate of native-born Americans is pretty low. That's not an adequate solution. You say, why?
Mm-hmm. Well, I say not, because you ask about a country in the beginning in your opening. A country, a nation state needs to have a sense of a common history, a common culture, a common civilization, common experiences that bind us together. And we went through a re-assimilation period, or an assimilation period, from about 1924 until the mid-60s, because our leadership in Congress understood we needed to have a time to bond back together, become Americans together again, because of the high immigration that we had in the previous, say, 20 or 30 or 40 years.
Right.
And so we're at this place now in America where we're seeing people marching in the streets that are pushing back against the American culture and the American civilization. And it's troubling to me that over the last 25 years, we've essentially phased out the promotion of assimilation, and we promoted instead multiculturalism and diversity as if it were our strength. And in fact, they're using it now to divide us, and that's what Barack Obama did throughout his presidency.
Everything you said, I think, is defensible and probably right. The problem with the tweet was that it suggested there's a racial component to American identity. Do you think that there is?
Well, there's a racial component to all of our discussion here in America, and there must be that, because the left is constantly pointing to the differences we have, and race, ethnicity, national origin, sexual orientation, prosperity versus poverty. But I'll say this, that we are all God's children. We are all created in His image. And America has been the most successful nation in merging these distinctions together on the common foundation of rights that come from God. What I should have done, Tucker, if I had more characters in that tweet, just added, you can't rebuild our civilization with somebody else's babies unless we adopt them.
So the idea is it doesn't matter what ethnic group the people come from as long as they share the same culture and language and shared history? Is that what I don't want to lead you to that, but is that what you're saying or not?
No, that is what I'm saying. Is if we're bound together by those, and by the way, language is the most powerful unifying force known throughout all of history. Having a common language. If we share those things, then we can communicate with each other. We can do it instinctively. And on top of that, English is essentially a carrier of liberty, and it expresses freedom and liberty more effectively than any other language on the planet. We're so fortunate to have English, our common language.
So I mentioned a minute ago that the Speaker of the House, your leader in the House, Paul Ryan, was asked earlier by Bret Baier about your tweet, and I wanted to play it for our viewers who might not have seen it. Here it is.
Mm-hmm. I don't think that statement reflects what is special about this country. I would like to think, and I haven't spoken to Steve about this, I'd like to think that he misspoke and it wasn't really meant the way that sounds, and hopefully he's clarified that.
So was it a misunderstanding between you, or is there a deep philosophical gulf between the two of you on what you believe?
I don't think there is there's no personal friction between us. I think I enjoy a good relationship with Paul Ryan. Yeah. Yeah, and I think that Paul has he's spoken about a different view on how we address our borders. I mean, he's surely argued that that it increases our economy when people come into America. He's more of an open borders advocate by far than I am. I'm the opposite. I think we should restore the respect for the rule of law, or we become a third world country. There's a philosophical difference there, but I think he just misunderstands what I said. And it was characterized by the left as having a race component to it. But you can look down through the words and the language, and there's nothing in my statement that references race in any way.
Right.
But I do reference culture and civilization, and that's what we've got to restore is Western civilization for the world, Tucker.
Sounds fair to me. Congressman, thanks for joining us tonight.
Thank you, Tucker. Appreciate it.
Up next, President Trump held his first full cabinet meeting today. What happened? We will tell you. Plus, the nation's largest abortion provider is upset about the prospective loss of $500 million in annual taxpayer subsidies. Talk to a representative from Planned Parenthood after the break. Well, President Trump held his very first cabinet meeting today, but even though he was inaugurated 53 days ago, 4 seats at that meeting remained empty. Those cabinet posts have not yet been filled. For more, we go now to Trace Gallagher. Hey, Trace.
Hey, Tucker, the administration says Democrats are still obstructing the confirmation of cabinet nominees, and Democrats are not exactly denying that, but they are putting some of the blame back on the White House for not filing the proper paperwork and from some scheduling snafus. Bottom line, as you say, the president's first cabinet meeting was light. 4 members today, including Agriculture Secretary nominee Sonny Perdue, whose hearing could be as early as next week, Labor Secretary nominee Alex Acosta, whose hearing has been pushed back a week because of scheduling, former Senator Dan Coates is now expected to sail through the Senate to become the new Director of National Intelligence, and U.S. Trade Representative nominee Robert Lighthizer has a confirmation hearing scheduled for tomorrow. Today, the president made it clear he is not pleased with the snail's pace of the confirmation process. Watch.
The main victim of this very partisan obstruction is the American public. Yet in spite of all of this, we've assembled a great team and already made historic progress in delivering results.
And while the president is eager to fill in his cabinet, he also wants to lean out the rest of government to get rid of the, quote, duplication and redundancy everywhere. Today, existing cabinet members were on hand as the president signed an executive order to reorganize the federal government and reduce waste. The order requires a thorough examination of every executive department and agency. The president did say he believes the government is fully prepared to handle the severe winter storm warning that is now threatening the entire Northeast. Tucker.
Trace Gallagher. Thanks, Trace. Well, the American Health Care Act doesn't just repeal parts of Obamacare. If passed, it would also fulfill the GOP's campaign promise to defund Planned Parenthood for at least 1 year anyway. Planned Parenthood provides more than 300,000 abortions a year. It also gets 40% of its budget, more than $500 million from the federal government. The impending derailment of the federal gravy train has abortion supporters upset. Dawn Legans is the executive vice president of Planned Parenthood, and she joins us tonight. Dawn, thanks for coming on.
Hey, good evening, Tucker.
So I've talked to a lot of Planned Parenthood people and defenders, and they always say it's not just about abortion. We do all these virtuous things, healthcare-related services for women, and defunding us would be a terrible problem. The Republicans say, look, that's fine. Just don't include abortion in your services. And Planned Parenthood comes back and says, no, abortion is too important to exclude. I wonder what the reasoning is there. Why is abortion so important to Planned Parenthood that you're willing to forego $500 million a year in federal subsidies?
Well, I'd like to say first and foremost that Planned Parenthood believes in the wisdom and power of the individual to decide what care is right for them and what doctor they should go to. And no one's going to bully, threaten, or bribe Planned Parenthood to not have that view. But 1.5 million people are at risk of losing access to cancer screenings, STD testing and treatment, and birth control because of this plan by Paul Ryan and Donald Trump to take that care away. And of course, people don't, they come to Planned Parenthood and we get reimbursed for providing preventive health care. We don't get a budget item, line item, and we don't get a big check. We get reimbursed like any hospital for providing a Pap test or a breast cancer screening.
But that doesn't change the question, which is, why include abortion if the services provided are necessary? Why not just take that out? It is a controversial thing. A lot of people think it's murder. Why not just take that out, and then taxpayers can feel good about subsidizing the rest of your services?
Well, again, taxpayers don't pay for abortion services. They help reimburse things like Pap tests and cancer screenings. But women deserve access to the full range of reproductive health care, and that includes safe, legal abortion. And so Planned Parenthood is going to let women make the choices they want to make about their care and go to the doctor they want to go to.
Then I've always wondered this, and maybe you can clear it up. So the most common cancer among women in the United States is breast cancer, and the majority of breast cancers are discovered in mammograms, which, while controversial, I think are still widely agreed upon the best screening. I don't think Planned Parenthood offers any mammograms, does it?
Well, they don't actually. Most cancers aren't initially discovered in mammograms. They're discovered in breast cancer screenings done by gynecologists all over this country, including those at Planned Parenthood.
Well,
and like any gynecologist, what we do is we refer to people for a mammogram at a radiologist's office, which is what every woman in America can tell you is what happens. They go to their gynecologist, they get a breast exam, something is found, and then they get referred to go get a mammogram.
Right.
And if something is found there, they go to get a biopsy. So that's how it works.
So Planned Parenthood does provide an awful lot of abortions every year. I think over 300,000. I think that's right, in that range. And the majority of them are after 5.5 weeks. That's the point at which the fetal heartbeat can be detected. I'm just wondering, as someone who works there, what do you think of that? What is being aborted? If you can hear the heartbeat, what is that thing that's being aborted? How do you feel about that?
Well, abortion is a right in this country. Women have their own views on whether or not they want to be pregnant. That is not a viable fetus at 5.5 weeks. Anyone knows that. And what you would do is make your own choice. And that's all Planned Parenthood has ever said, is that every woman should make their own choice.
Right, but since you work
I've made
at the
my
country's
own choices.
right, but I mean, what specifically do you think? You work at the country's biggest abortion provider. If you can hear the heartbeat of this thing, this fetus, what is it? Is it just a piece of tissue, or is it a separate human being?
I think that's up to each individual to decide what they believe, but women in this country, 1 in 3 women have an abortion during their lifetime. Obviously, they are making their own choice. And what we're here to talk about today, I'm here to talk about today is that the Pence-Ryan plan will take away health and cancer screenings and birth control for millions of women in this country.
Hold on, I'm sorry, I don't want to let you filibuster. You've said that, and I think health screenings are important. I think Planned Parenthood probably does some good work. But the reason it's a controversial place is because it's the country's biggest abortion provider, and you're one of the people who run it. And so I just want to know what you think. If you can hear the fetal heartbeat and then it's extinguished, what do you think of that? Is that a big deal or not to you? And if not, why not?
Well, I take seriously all of the health care work that we provide at Planned Parenthood. I believe in safe, legal abortion. I believe it's up to each woman and individual.
I know, but what do you think?
So I'm not going to make a judgment.
No, but why can't you give me a straight answer? This is at the core of what you do. You're the biggest abortion provider in the United States. It's not like you haven't thought of this. What do you think of that?
I would say that it's a fetus, and so.
But what is a fetus?
I would say that it is up to each woman to decide whether. You and I can differ on this all day, Tucker. And
we're not even differing because you're not telling me what you think. We're not differing at all. You're refusing to say what you think. Is it a separate being, or is it a piece of flesh?
What I'm going to say is that 70% of Americans believe that Roe v. Wade should be the law of the land. Okay. They believe that women should each individually be able to have their choices about what they want to do in their pregnancy. And they definitely believe that women are at risk for losing care under the plan that Donald Trump and
I get your talking points. I've let you repeat them a lot. Hold on. With respect, I've let you repeat your talking points, which I've heard 1,000 times, many times, but I want to take it just a level deeper because I think it's worth it. It's a big deal to a lot of people. And people say, look, this is killing a life. A heart is beating. You can hear it at 5.5 weeks. And the majority of your abortions take place after 5.5 weeks. So I want to know if that bothers you at all. Does it at all? Do you ever stop and think, wow, what is happening here? Is a life being taken? People say a life is being taken. Do you think that?
I personally favor safe legal abortion in this country, decided on by each individual woman and her doctor to decide for themselves. I personally do not believe that that is a viable fetus at that point.
Not saying viable.
And there are rules there are rules we follow.
Why are you
Roe
giving me
v.
robotic
Wade laid
responses?
out.
I'm asking you a human question, and I hope you'll favor me with a human answer. I'm not saying it's viable. At 5.5 weeks, it's not, but you can hear the heartbeat. Is that a human being or not? Is it separate from the mother or not? A different blood type, often a different sex, different DNA? It doesn't seem like a tumor or something that is connected to the woman wholly. It's distinct. What does that mean? I would think you would have thought about it, considering you provide more of them than anyone. Is that
I
a
have
crazy
thought
question?
about it very much for myself, but I am not going to project onto other women what I believe. What I believe is that women have the right and the choice, and we're going to leave it up to them. And at Planned Parenthood, people
you're not
come
helping them make
for
that
high
choice
quality
with your
health
stilted
care.
answer
We do
at all. No,
we
but
do
you're not
help them make a choice.
If you think it's a
I
profound
don't
choice,
help them personally make the choice. They get to make it, whether it's with their minister or their doctor or their partner or husband.
With respect, I know you're smart, but you're giving me a series of rehearsed and very childish answers, and it's disappointing. I would think that you would have grappled with this a little bit. Have you? Do you ever grapple with it? Do you think, wow, this is a profound thing? All these protesters outside holding up signs. Do you ever pause and say, what are they doing? It's not just about disempowering women. There's another agenda here. That's a real agenda. Do you ever think of that?
I often do look at those protesters and I wonder how they can be so heartless to be yelling the things that they do at women in their lives when they know nothing about what's going on in that woman's life. They don't have any idea what service she might be there for, but that doesn't stop them. So I'm often concerned about the shame and stigma that people try to force onto women in this country.
But why would they want to do that? Have you ever thought about that, have you?
I appreciate it. I do.
All right.
So
that was a uniquely shallow conversation, Dawn. But thanks for joining us anyway.
Thank you. Anytime.
Up next, is the battle for America's soul over and Christianity lost? How can the faith survive in a post-Christian America? Our next guest will try and answer those questions. Plus, Congress is moving at a glacial pace. So can anything be done to get some work done? Republican Majority Whip Steve Scalise, here next. Well, the culture wars in America are over and the bad guys won. That is a provocative argument of Christian writer Rod Dreher. He's the author of a new book released tomorrow. It's called The Benedict Option, a strategy for Christians in a post-Christian nation. Well, our money may still say in God we trust, but according to the author, cultural Christianity is practically extinguished, and in many ways, America is now hostile to Christian religious belief. What's the solution for believers? Rod Dreher joins us now. Rod, thanks a lot for coming on. So, a post-Christian America, people look at the demographics and say, well, wait a second, it's like 75% self-professed Christians. What do you mean by that?
Well, it's a facade. I believe that clearly we still have lots of Christians in America. Most Americans identify as Christians, but Christianity, as it has been historically understood, Tucker, is no longer at the center of our nation and of how we think of ourselves. I mean, if you look at the numbers in the United States of the people who are falling away from Christianity, especially in the millennial generation, it's catastrophic. We've never seen anything like this. Plus, the content of the belief that Christians have is very far from historic Orthodox Christianity. The Notre Dame sociologist Christian Smith has talked about how we believe now this total feel-good, squishy Christianity that is not biblical Christianity. And this is what I mean. We are in a post-Christian situation in that sense, is we've forgotten what it means to be Christian.
So what, and I should just point out to our viewers who may just be tuning in, you are a Christian, and you're not applauding this trend, merely noting it, but you have a prescription for sincere Christians in America as to how to respond to this. What is it?
That's right, Tucker. I'm a conservative Christian myself, and I think this is a terrible thing that's happening in our country. But I think that we have to wake up as Christians and realize the situation we're actually in and quit telling ourselves this happy, clappy stories about America. And we have to get back to traditional Christianity. We have to go back and rediscover our roots in terms of what we believe, but also in terms of the faith we practice. We have got to place our church and our faith above everything else right now and really dig deep. Pope Benedict himself, Pope Benedict XVI, said that we are living in a time that's like the fall of the Roman Empire in terms of our spiritual crisis. I think he's right, and I think that we have got to respond radically to this situation.
So the evangelical Christians involved in politics basically have been saying for 30 years, the country is deeply sympathetic to us. There is a majority out there somewhere, and once they hear our message, they'll join with us. You say that's not true. We need to figure out Christians need to figure out how to engage differently in politics.
Oh, that's right. When I was coming up in the 70s and 80s, the belief among Christian conservatives was that the country was basically with us, but we were ruled by a liberal elite who kept us down. Right. And that's how we proceeded. We thought that if we just won the political offices and the judiciary, we would renew the country. That is no longer operative. That is not true. And we have got to operate on the basis of reality, not just what we wish were happening. And that means we have got to stay involved politically at some level, if only to protect religious liberty. But I think we have to return to localism and building our local churches and schools and local institutions as a sort of arc to get us across this dark age.
Huh. So that sounds a little bit like withdrawal from mainstream society, is it?
Yes and no. We have to withdraw somewhat in order to rebuild who we are and our own sense of identity in the Bible and in our Christian tradition. But we have to withdraw so we can continue to go out into the world and present the face of Christ as he really is. If we don't withdraw and study and pray and build our practices up, we can't bring the world the gospel. I mean, I think that we have to withdraw from the world so we can be for the world who Christ wants us to be.
You can tell when someone's sincere and really rooted in his faith too, and you know who the phonies are, and they're definitely out there. The book is The Benedict Option. It's blowing up the internet, the Christian portions of it anyway. It's out tomorrow. Thanks a lot, Rod. Good to see you.
Hey, it's a pleasure. Thank you.
Thank you. Well, up next, what's really happening on Capitol Hill? Not a lot, it looks like. Is Congress prepared to work with President Trump? Majority Whip Steve Scalise joins us in just a moment. Well, it's been 2.5 months since the new Congress convened, but despite controlling both houses of Congress and the presidency, Republicans have not accomplished much. No major bills passed. The only one even introduced, the proposed Obamacare replacement, could be in trouble, especially now the Congressional Budget Office estimated it would take away health insurance from 24 million people. That's the headline tomorrow. Is it right? Congressman Steve Scalise of Louisiana joins us now. He's the Republican Majority Whip. Congressman, thanks a lot for coming on.
Great to be here, Tucker.
24 million people will be dropped from health coverage in the next 10 years, according to the CBO. That's the headline on the front page of every paper tomorrow. Is this the end of the... I mean, what does this mean? That sounds bad.
Well, the problem is they got it wrong if you look at that headline. What CBO said is, if given the option, which in our bill, we actually give people freedom. You don't have to get on Obamacare. You can get off of Obamacare. And what CBO is estimating is, even with taxpayer subsidies, they think 14 million people just next year will get off of Obamacare if given the choice. Meaning they could still stay on it, but if they want to get off, they have the freedom to do it, and 14 million will. That's not lost coverage. That's not throwing anybody off. But CBO calls that lost coverage. To me, that means you just had the freedom to say, I don't want to be on Obamacare anymore, and I got to make that choice for my family. And now you have better options because there's going to be a competitive marketplace that we create where you can go buy whatever you want for your family at a lower cost. And CBO, most importantly, backs up the fact that when our plan is implemented, it will lower costs dramatically, double digits decrease in the cost of health care premiums for families.
So when the CBO says there's going to be a massive decrease in the number of people covered, they mean by Obamacare, not covered by any insurance policy at all.
That's correct, because what we're doing is getting rid of Obamacare and then letting families make the choice of what they want to do for their health care. They actually get to pick their own plan, which is the opposite of Obamacare. Obamacare said, no matter what you think and you want for your family, if you like what you have, you can keep it only if an unelected bureaucrat in Washington says this is a plan you can have. But we changed that.
Well, here's what I don't get. So there's no mandate in this bill, right? So you don't have to buy health insurance.
We zero out the individual mandate and the employer mandate penalty, so that's all free.
But you keep in the requirement that insurance companies cover people with pre-existing conditions.
That's correct.
Right, because it's popular. I don't see how those are sustainable together. So that means I don't have to buy health insurance, which I think is great, shouldn't have to, but it also means the the insurers cannot turn me down if I show up to buy a policy. So why would I bother to buy insurance? Why wouldn't I just show up as soon as I get my diagnosis?
Well, you would need to have continuous coverage, first of all. But the other thing is, there are going to be real options for you. If you look at Obamacare, one of the things it's done, it's led to monopolies in about a third of the marketplaces across the country. So even if you're out trying to buy insurance in Obamacare, you literally only have one choice, which is called a monopoly, which is why costs are up. It's because all the mandates are so unworkable that companies just stopped writing policies.
Well, of course.
So what we've seen is a lot of these insurance companies that left the marketplace said, look, under your plan, we will actually be able to come back in and write policies again for people that they want to buy. If you like what you have, you truly can go and buy it for your family.
But what happens if you don't want to buy? Because it's expensive. I mean, under any plan, it's expensive. It's your choice. But
it's your choice to buy whatever you want.
Of course, but the insurance companies are required to take me no matter, even if they know they're going to lose money on me, they have to take me because Congress is forcing them to. So why are they going to be sustainable businesses?
Well, it's not as simple as gaming the system, which you're seeing under Obamacare, where people literally can get out of the system for months, and then if they get sick, they can just jump right back in. That's not how it'll work. You know, you'll have to be in the system if you want to have a plan, but ultimately you get to choose the plan. That's the most important thing. There are tax credits for people that are low income, working people that can have the ability. Right now, you get a tax break if you get your insurance from your employer. About 61% of the people in this country get their health care from their employer. But what happens if your employer doesn't provide health care? What happens if you're a small business owner? We're, for the first time, actually giving the same tax break that employers get to families that can't get it through their employer. And so they can go and buy whatever they want for their family. And we bolster health savings accounts. One of the biggest success stories pre-Obamacare in healthcare was HSAs, health savings accounts, which actually lowered cost and gave people more options. Under Obamacare, they literally obliterated the HSA market. We're bringing that back so that families can actually go work through HSAs and get the ability to buy lower cost health care, what they want for their family. It's their choice, not a government bureaucrat in Washington.
So we get a ton of email on this show, and 1 out of 3 is along these lines. Boy, I voted for Trump, I voted Republican, they control all the levers of power in D.C., and they haven't done anything. Got no major bills through. The president has 4 empty seats in the cabinet room today. Why are Democrats so much better at obstructing than Republicans were 8 years ago when Democrats controlled everything?
Well, first of all, and this hasn't gotten a lot of attention, we've actually put a number of bills on President Trump's desk that he signed into law. One of the most high profile was the bill getting rid of the stream buffer rule. In one stroke of the pen from a bill we put on President Trump's desk a few weeks ago, we saved over 70,000 jobs in the coal industry. In fact, President Trump had coal miners at the bill signing. He didn't give a bill to a member of Congress who helped write the bill. He actually gave the bill to a coal miner. Bill Johnson from Ohio led this effort. This was a bill Congress passed, House and Senate. Got
so
to the
you're
president's
satisfied
desk,
with the pace of
and he signed
achievement
it.
so far?
We had a 27.5-hour committee meeting. I was on the committee, Energy and Commerce, last week. They said it's a record, longest committee meeting in Congress where we passed the bill to gut Obamacare, the repeal and replace bill. Longest committee meeting. Democrats fought us every step of the way. And it was a very unified vote. Every Republican voted for our bill. This is the repeal and replace bill. Every Democrat voted against it because they know our bill guts Obamacare and actually replaces it with reforms that put patients back in charge. So it showed you, when you really get down to the bottom of it, we've been working hard. The legislative process takes some time to do it, but we are getting a bill that's ready to go to the House floor in about a week, and then it's going to get to the president's desk ultimately, and President Trump wants to sign it because he's going to follow through on his promise.
Congressman, thanks for coming on.
Great to be back with you, Tucker.
Thank you. Coming up, gangster rapper Snoop Dogg apparently called for the violent overthrow of the government or something. When you lose Snoop, have you lost the nation? We'll bring you the answer next. Well, Snoop Dogg, the permanently high gangster rapper, is back in the spotlight tonight thanks to a new video where he apparently promotes the murder, or at least the overthrow, of President Trump. In his new music video for the song Lavender, Snoop is teleported to a universe inhabited solely by clowns. After an innocent family man is gunned down by a police officer, Snoop gets his revenge by pointing a prop gun at a clown version of President Trump and pulling the trigger. Don't worry, though, the character playing the president does not die. He just gets chained up while Snoop can you pronounce it? Snoop smokes weed, as he so often does. Let nobody say that Snoop Dogg stood on the sidelines in the great political battles of our time. That's about it for us tonight. On Wednesday, we'll be interviewing President Trump. We want your help for that. Go to Tucker Carlson Tonight, the Facebook page, and tell us what we ought to ask the president. You can also send your question to us on Twitter. Tweet Tucker Carlson. Use the hashtag AskPOTUS. Stay with Fox. Sean Hannity next.